Hello, my name is Shinay Tredeau, and I'm joined by Bhavani Maki. This is the Yogi's Roadmap podcast. Welcome, friends and practitioners on the path. Thank you for choosing to spend your time with us today. It really does mean so much. We hope you are enjoying these conversations and they are feeding you as much as they are feeding us. Bhavani, it's great to see you.
Great to see you too, sister. Aloha.
Aloha. So I want to know, how's it going with the Vibhuti Pada, if I can say it, Vibhuti Pada, the third chapter of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. For decades in my learning, I've heard this chapter. There's a lot of fear or hype or confusion around this chapter, and a lot of people consider it the magical powers chapter, which is many people say, oh, I'm just going to skip it. It's not grounded in reality. But I'd like to get your alternative and broadened understanding so far of this chapter and what insights you're getting in the unpacking.
Yeah, it's actually been quite a surprise. We've only gone to the seventh sutra and I'm taking it as it comes. It's surprisingly practical.
Mm.
It's surprisingly grounded. And from what I understand is that there was like a shift from animism to a more like anthropomorphic or anthropological or anthropocentric, however you say that freaking
Mhm.
word,
Mhm.
um, awareness of our surroundings. And so in that shift, there was kind of like almost a shunning of the old ways of feeding the gods and the goddesses, and particularly there was a lot of tantric worship of the goddess in her milk dripping and bloodthirsty form. So in some ways, it's fantastic because Patanjali's given us this whole technology of consciousness. There's power in just understanding what consciousness is, how your mind works, how it spirals, what your triggers are, um, how far you're going to go with it, that you have the power to transform yourself, to adopt many different modalities, and to show up in different ways and still remain authentic to yourself. So, just in that nature of understanding your mind, then you can really work with the natural world and with the supranormal and the supernatural.
Mhm.
So it's actually been really surprising to me how practical it is. And it's last week's sutra or yesterday's sutra, number 7, speaks about how all of these practices are more external. And as we go into the supernatural realm, it's really about it's a more intimate practice that doesn't rely on your external senses, but it's about tuning inwards to the realms that don't have form. And so, of course, every form has its formless nature and it's making an appearance, it's creating an apparition. So we're learning to really create a run in the stocking of the veil and
Mhm.
see that there's a fluid reality that we're working with. So it's been really, really exciting. And each week is an adventure because this isn't something that I've like studied before. I mean, I actually kind of, when I opened my book, I was like, oh, I have studied these because there was underlining and there were little notes in the headers and things like that. But it's kind of like when you're ready, you're ready.
Mhm.
So it's very exciting. And the word vibhuti literally means to turn to ash. So there's like you've got done all of this tapas, you've done all of these practices, um, and you've learned about how your mind forms these images of reality and your ability to kind of loosen your fixation on them so that you come to this place of Turiya. And I've been writing about this in my manuscript. There's 3 states of consciousness, which are kind of like, they're called avasta. So remember, Tadadrashtahu Svarupe Avastanam. Avasta means like the ground or the home reality. And these are like the ordinary waking states of Jagrat. There's the deep sleep of Sushupti, and then there's the dream time of Svapna. And then in its own category is Turiya, which means the fourth. And it's where you enter the fourth dimension, which is a quantum field. In there's quantum entanglement. There's also alternate realities that are happening simultaneously, and it's not considered to be a state of consciousness because it is consciousness itself. So it's quite exciting to open this chapter. And before, where these siddhi, or these kind of like side effects, these little extra special gifts that come as a result of developing skill in your own awareness and your ability to navigate, where they seem so abstruse, now they don't. For instance, making yourself as heavy as an elephant. And children do that all the time. When they don't want to do something, they can just become limp and they are immovable, and then even being light as a feather. Like there's what's so lovely about this is that it brings us back in touch with like that animist tradition, which is where we really see that life is multi-layered, and we access these layers through metaphor and symbol and imagery, because everything in the world is like a mirror and a reflection of this liquid, fluid world that we live in. So we've done all this practice. We've stewed in our juices. We've, the stuff that was like stuck in the depths of our psyche was churning upon itself. There's butter, there's milk, it's all nourishing. And it's exciting to open this chapter. It really is a new chapter. I have to tell you, Nico was like, Nico was like, Mom, have you thought of a title for your new book? And I was like, well, I haven't really settled on one. And he said, well, what about Bhavani's journey through her mind?
Nice.
I was like, that's true. I'm not sure if everybody wants to go there, but
How can we say that without saying that?
yeah, right. Exactly. Isn't that funny?
That's great.
Yeah. So we're taking like a new adventure, and it's out of this world.
It's really exciting to me because I've had inklings of that all along, in terms of this chapter kind of being almost taken too literally, like these magical powers, and as if I can't remember what, I think it was in a movie, but someone was saying like some people call it magic and I call it nature, and that it's just what is. Magic is what is, and yet there are these, we kind of tend to think about it as some fantastical way of being or seeing the world kind of with rose-colored glasses or something other, or instead of just this plain ordinariness.
Well, it seems it's only magic unless you know the trick,
So true.
right?
So true.
So once you know the trick, it's a sleight of hand. It's a play on the senses, and it's like where, I guess, I mean, I don't do magic tricks, but basically they're working with the conditioned mind to garner its attention and to rely upon its memory field and conjure through its own imagination.
Mm.
So, like, we can see where that first pada really trains us to see the tricks that our mind can play and to see the way that, we tend to kind of like only see certain layers. And I've been really reflecting on this. It was like doing this structural integration course. Um, and my teacher, Richie Mintz, he was talking about how, like, in the Western, if you speak to a Western allopathic medical practitioner and you ask them how many layers the body has, they'll tell you three. There's the superficial, there's the subcutaneous, and then there's the deep. And he's like, but we know that there's hundreds and thousands of layers, right?
Mm.
And I was, just really seeing this as a parallel to what Patanjali is offering to us, where in typical Western psychology, we only have the conscious, the subconscious, and the unconscious. And he offers us so many layers, right? Vitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara, Sananda, it just goes on and on. And then in the Vibhuti Pada, I was like, wow. And now here's all these other layers of potential that are available to us. So it's
Mm.
quite interesting because in the last sutra, it was like, this is like, it just gets more and more internal, and you think you've landed in internal, and then the boundary rolls back and you realize that that was just another like surface layer. And then even attaining integration, psycho-spiritual maturity of samadhi, it's just the beginning. So, it is endless. And the impossible, we do it all the time. It's happening all the time. So why would we limit ourselves to what our mind can even perceive, right? Yeah.
Yeah, let's just pause right there. Pause on that for a moment. It's brilliant. So I want to talk a little bit more about the yoga as an animistic tradition and as a living art and science. And it's really feeding my soul when you keep talking about this. And maybe this also dovetails into the big God question because there's lots of deities mentioned in the Hindu pantheon, and but the Yoga Sutra are very separate from that whole um, religious purview of, yeah, of what was happening at that time.
Yeah. So even this concept of animist is something that happened way later.
Hmm.
Like, even the concept of formalized religion, once there
Right.
was that, there was a shift from the animist tradition. And then it became known as, it's like when you're entering a new phase and maybe you give the old phase kind of a name so that you can create a distinction. Um, and really, if we look just in our development as a species, from being nomadic, from being very earth centered and following herds and following the rains and being in tune with the seasons, like in Hawaii, the Hawaiian nation, people would actually move to different parts of the island during different parts of the year.
Mm.
So there was a sense of like this cyclical, nomadic circumambulation of the space, that there were, and it was interesting actually yesterday. One of the students, she was mentioning that there was some like trending meme on, social media, which said like, you're not a tree, you can move around. which is really interesting because there's like, soil that is fertile for us in certain places. And we may be even comfortable where we are, but it's nice to be able to move around and set out tendrils and experience, see what kind of fruit you are.
Hmm.
Is what I've said. But then when there was a shift where we became, shift to agronomy, is that the right word? I'm like not saying words very well.
I don't
Agriculture.
know. Okay, okay, yes.
Agriculture. Then, people were able to really like set down roots, and then there was a building usually of a central temple, and then the community built around that, and you were able to work within one place with the seasons. And then suddenly the shift became more um, anthropocentric, so
Hmm.
more focused on peoples and individuals and who had the land and who had the power and who was, maybe the one who was more sage in reading the environment and knowing when the time was right. So the shift became more towards humans, and then humans making themselves in the image of God and having like, authority over all the creatures. So
Hmm.
I think a lot of it was, the evolution from that nomadic tendency.
Mm.
Yeah. And I forgot your question. So maybe you want to reiterate it to me because I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
it's more just speaking to the animistic tradition of yoga because I feel like a lot of times, like you've said before, and I don't think it's your quote. Maybe you were quoting someone else, maybe Richard Miller, but he was saying like, don't try and fit your life into yoga. And so it's kind of like using yoga as this framework for what I think, for an ideology of
Right.
like, what like what spirituality even means or what religion means, although those are very different terms and can be dissected a lot. But it's speaking towards the really the grounded nature of this these yogic teachings, because I even hesitate to say that it is a tradition, but it's so much more or less than that. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
very, yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Where it's like, religion and worship is a thing that you do to get something more
Right.
in this life
Right.
so that you can achieve affluence or status. And, when we look at the old ways, um, it wasn't something separate. You had relationship, you formed relationship with the land. Even this idea of landlord, where it's like when you come to a place, there's energies there. There's devas, which are kind of like, the embodiment of the nature spirits and of the different high archetypes of different animals, and of the animals, minerals, vegetables, the winds, the rains, the different kinds of waves. And so, when you came to a place, you had to formally like ask if you could occupy that space and then
Mhm.
do ritual to feed this land that was feeding you.
Mm.
So I was even like reframing, a little bit in my understanding of that, like the Shanti pot, where,
Yes, please go there.
I haven't completely done it, but I've just held it loosely, and maybe you can help me flesh it out. Sahanavavatu. It's like, um, you know, oftentimes it's translated like, may we be protected. But
Mm.
I see it as like, we're here to commune with these spirits
Yeah.
that are the landlords of this space, and even in Gayatri, in this particular locale, and then coning upwards, it's like it evokes the image of the witch's hat, where they used to gather in a circle and there was a coning energy. You're working with supernatural forces. So it's like, here, we're here to commune with you, and we're here to listen to you and to be in communication with you. So communing and communication. So instead of letting our monkey minds run the show and build empires that will rise and fall and the Tower of Babel, like, we're here in communication. And then Sahanau Bunaktu, we're here to feed this energy that feeds us. And, I was even reflecting on that because, like, as you know, for instance, in the rituals in India, the deities, they need feeding. So you offer them food, and then it's prasad. You eat their leftovers. You offer them agarbatti because they take in through the subtle senses. So it's the smell, and through the rituals of that. And then Sahaviryam Karavavahai, it's like, we're here to work with this power. We're not generating this power. We're here to, like, become conduits and to reflect it back to itself. Even this, like we were speaking about yesterday, Surya Namaskara and the sun. Sun worship is very ancient, and on a biochemical level, vitamin D is important for all our functions. So it's like the vitamin D deity, and we're offering to the sun, these movements, these gestures of offering. Then what is it? Saviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navatita Mastu, right? This is the brilliance. This is the illuminator, the elucidator. Like, we see you, we recognize you, we offer our obeisance to you because you are the one who inspires us, who brings us health, who quickens us. You are the energy that is flowing through the vortex of our heart, that is pumping through us, that is present in the stem cells when we're in utero. Ma vid vishavahai. Like, I don't want to be in conflict with this energy. I'm here to collaborate. I am here to assist you, because with your power is why I'm even here. So it's a reframing, instead of like, oh, help me to be more powerful and energetic and get bigger and be brilliant. It's like, no, all of this is a borrowing, and we feed what feeds us. So yeah, it's a real reframing. And and you've been to India enough to know that, like, yoga isn't even a formal thing, or ritual isn't even a formal thing. It's actually completely woven into the fabric of the community. There's certain days that throughout the week, on Tuesdays, it's like you honor all of the mechanical things, and you do puja on your rickshaw and on your cows. And it's like there's cycles in which there's like an honoring of all of these implements that were given. And really, there's just temples everywhere. Even before you step out your door, the first thing they're doing is creating the rangoli, the yantra, the sacred mandalas, which then are going to be like scattered by our footsteps as we go out into the world. Yeah, so we're the ones who've kind of made it an exercise and made it a thing that we're going to forget, another thing that we have to do. But that's kind of part of the split, but also part of like this deeper, more primal impulse that is reemerging within us. I mean, I know in Hawaii, it's like, it's so wonderful to be here because we're not in America. really. I mean, even though it has been usurped at gunpoint, this is not America. Um, and there are stones, pohaku, that have names and have spirits. And in the animist tradition, which I don't even like saying that because I just feel it's the reality,
Yeah.
they're part of the stories, they're part of the inception, and they're actually our ancestors.
Mm.
So I remember, like, my teachers in India, when they would do the opening prayer, they would also chant their entire lineage. And part of that lineage is reaching back deep into the underground, the subterranean roots of our pre-human states. Yeah. So I
It
know,
reminds, oh,
no, I was just going to say, like, I have this beautiful, my gardenias are having a bumper crop year. And, I just like, even like taking a flower, it's like just taking a moment to say, oh my God, you're so beautiful. You're so fragrant. May I please, take this flower and offer it with love to Patanjali or Saraswati or whatever. And I know, like, Martin Fractal speaks about that, how even the way when you garden, you don't just go into the beds at night and rip the little baby carrots out. Like, you have to wait till it's morning and you have to ask, and you're always making an offering, whether it's of gratitude or of tobacco or of sage or sweetgrass or water, or even just like praising the beauty and the fecundity of the world that we're able to take from it, you know? Yeah. It doesn't take a lot of time.
no.
Just love. Love doesn't take time. And as my husband's grandmother would say, it doesn't even cost a penny.
It's so true. I too was going to quote Martin Prechtel, and he said this great thing. He said, humans aren't here to get their way. And it was just like, oh yeah, the Anthropocene is here, it's like humans are centered, and yet it's completely backwards. And I think he said this great thing too of when you meet someone, in the indigenous culture, you the first thing would never be like, hi, what's your name? It's like, hi, where are you from, or who are your people? And it again, it's like that whole list of, your teachers and your ancestors and your tribe of people. And it's a great reminder for me in that it's so not about me. And I have a job to do. I can, so he talks about it as making beauty in the world. Martin talks about it as making beauty in the world. And I think that's just a wonderful way to kind of situate it, is that we are here to create beauty in the ways that we can. And, I love your story about asking, may I please take a flower and offer it, and those moments of being able to slow down and really honor the earth. And before I became a mother, I gotta say, like, I really didn't get it. I cognized it, but there is a deeper level of understanding of the earth as our mother, and she just holds us in this way and keeps on giving and offering love and growing flowers and the whole thing. And it's not that, for me, it's not that humans aren't needed, or that I'm not needed, so therefore I should just disappear. But there's this beautiful co-creation, and to be able to actually make an offering and beauty and prayers as a gift, not prayer as a want or I need something.
I have had the pleasure of working with this woman, Macho Skanga, and she grew up on tribal lands, and she was saying, how it was a big deal, when she left the tribe to go live in, the Western world. And it was such a personal question when people asked her name. And then also the need for eye contact. Like, they learn that when someone is speaking, you don't look in their eyes, you look at the ground. You look at the ground from when they're coming from. And that they would have ceremonies, in which it was mostly silence, and you just waited. And when the words came, they came, but you could be sitting for hours. So a lot of these people, when they come together, they don't actually chitta chat. There's a silent communication in which you're just sharing your energy. And she also said that, when you're asked who you are in, within tribes, just what you were saying, you say who your tribe is, where the lands are from, and then your function. We are the fire keepers. Like, this is what we do. We keep and we care for the fire. And even that, like, I think maybe, it's interesting where before, I'm going to kind of contradict myself, where people then, became more situated in a particular place and built cities and whatnot. Something that I really noticed in this country, is that people move around a lot. And it's also become so cost prohibitive for people to buy places, but also people always want to upgrade to something newer. And where I come from, people live where they live, for generations. So even this idea of the family tree is like where you put the placentas of your family, and that connects you to the earth. It's feeding the tree of your origin. It's really, really a lovely practice, and we did that on our land, actually. We had, when I hosted Patabi Joyce, we had just been blessed with the stewardship of our farm, and it was like completely empty. We homesteaded, and he came and he did a puja on our land, in which we fed Bhumi Devi, the earth mother, the earth goddess. And it was like, we had to circumambulate the space. We had to, not had to, but we offered mantras and flowers and coconut water. And then we planted a tree there, a Suriname cherry tree, which later is where we put Nico's placenta, which has a tree of life. It is the tree of life. I mean, and it's round, and it's just like, oh my God, all you think about is the baby. You don't realize you have this huge organ that, was growing inside of you. And you put that in the earth as well. So it was interesting. It was like, life only makes sense when you play it backwards. So it was like, oh, now I realize, like, of course, that's where Bhumi Devi, where we, like, you're not really installing her, but maybe you're installing her in your awareness. You're giving her a place, a particular, like, private sanctuary, and then feeding her, like, from in Swedish, the I'm trying to think of what the name is, but the word for the womb is life's mother. So it's like you're feeding into that. And even, I mean, it's so wonderful, like growing up Nordic, we grow like it's part of our culture. There's fairies everywhere. Every flower is a fairy. Every berry is a fairy. And even carrots are called morot, mother's roots.
Oh.
So it's like, it's just, and we also grow up knowing that there's a tomte, which is kind of like a dwarf, but it's a little nature spirit whose responsibility is to take care of your home and your hearth. And at night, they fix things and they take care of things. And I see them. In Hawaii, they're Menehune, which is actually, they were a tribe of peoples. I remember speaking to, like 30 years ago in Honolulu, I was talking to an old, tutu, an old grandmother, Hawaiian grandmother. And I asked her if she was from Kauai. And she said, I'm from the land of Mu. This was Lemuria. Like,
Oh.
and what happened is the Polynesian came and the Tahitians, they were a much bigger tribe. The people who lived here originally, the Menehune, they were little people.
Oh, wow.
And then they were overpowered. They were like a peaceful people.
Mm.
So, there are people who remember this. And I
Mm.
see the Menehune. But the
Mm.
nature of these beings is you see them fleeting. They're always in your peripheral vision, and you look and they're gone. But always been present. They've always been there. But really interesting on a side note is Hanai, which is adopted family, Uncle Johnny Akana, who's a dear friend. And he had a place down at Kalihiwai, like this house right on the beach, which would be like a bazillion-dollar mansion now, but it's still there and it's a bit dilapidated and whatnot, full of centipedes. And he told me that when he was a kid, before they brought in electricity, all the ancestors were walking around.
Wow.
As they started to put in these huge transducers, they started fading because we filled our atmosphere with so many EMFs and so many electrical vibrations and even light pollution. There isn't as much space for them to reveal. So,
Mm.
our ancestors are absolutely present, and they're
Mm.
not limited to human forms. Truly, yoga is about all my relations.
Yeah.
Even when we look at the Samkhya chart, which is, what can be measured and what can be numbered, we're able to track our consciousness back through the elements. Then,
Mm.
oh, I'm getting chicken skin now. Then through the power of odor, of taste,
Ah,
essences, all the way back to creator.
yeah.
So it's and it's a wonderful because yoga is so pragmatic. It's like, okay, you think this is something you got to learn. It's something else you're putting into your mind. Um, Come to your senses. And then we've spoken about this before, develop your supra sensuous awareness. You have 54 senses.
Mm.
We're going to enumerate them. You have the sense of humor, a
Mm.
beauty, a sense of familiarity, a sense of prescience, a sense of like the ominous. We
Mm.
have so many senses that are beyond our rational mind, and life is not confined to what we can, write down through taxonomy, which is a hierarchy that this begets this, begets this, begets this. There is Turiya, the fourth layer, which is beyond time, space, causality, and solidity. There's the milky soup, the cytoplasmic ooze that is formless, that is like, it's there. And isn't it wonderful that Patanjali in the Samadhi Pada, and he goes further into it in the Kaivalya Pada, he speaks about it as Dharma Mega Samadhi,
Mm.
which is like it's like this gathering of heavenly hosts. it's the metaphor. It's like it's a pregnant rain cloud. And before there is this like downpour and download of rhythm, which is wisdom that is beyond what we can even limit to words. It's a rhythm and it's a pulse of reality. It's like before, I'm sure you experience it in the desert where you are, before the rainstorm, there's this like sonic electricity. There's
Mm-hmm.
this feeling of like, it's described as pregnant again, like, oh my gosh, the water's going to break. Like, you know, I mean, when my water broke, I couldn't even see. I couldn't even see anything. And it was like, the energy of a tsunami that was moving through me. I was so there, but I wasn't even there. Yeah. It was something else I wanted to say about that, but it's evading me in the moment. It'll pop up again. Yeah.
It'll come back. This is so wonderful. I'm just, as you're talking, I'm getting a brand new sense. I mean, we talk a lot about just the hijacking of yoga, kind of like the whitewashing of yoga. It's kind of been usurped by the wellness movement. Like, just kind of these ways that, yeah, we kind of try and, shove our life
It's a
into.
hashtag, it's a brand, it's copyrighted, it's incorporated.
Yes.
I mean, come on.
Exactly. And it's like, and f for me, like the whole, like what I keep coming back to is like, oh yeah, forever, since the beginning of time that humans have, been on this planet, there's always been the beaten path and then off the beaten path, always. And it's like it's talking about the not mainstream continually. And it's really kind of, and it's almost like we can't talk about it. It's like we have to talk around it because because it's so subtle, and so it has to be experienced, I think, through the body, and it really has to be an experiential education.
And really, it's a form of medicine, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that we're offering. And when you're in a medicine ritual, you're in a shamanic ritual, there are songs, there are particular deities that you're working with. I mean, people now in this movement, which is great, where they're working with plant medicines, but they don't even know the energies that come with that plant medicine. They don't know how to work with these spirits, work with them as teachers and entities in their own right. So, when we really like look at it, it's very much about like going into the dark. Most shamanic rituals are done in the dark, in which
Mm.
you invite the wild and the unknown and the holy. And there's like a descent into the underworld, and there will be shape shifting. You're inviting yourself to get out of your mind, to get out of, get out of your rational mind, and invite like that communication to happen through going into visionary states, to going into the dream realm. And so in like, Adi Shankaracharya, who's part of our parampara, he said the yogi lives their life as if it was a dream. They realize that everything, like there's like a childlike innocence and wonder and faith as we walk through life, and all of these apparitions that are appearing, and yet we know we're in the lap of something bigger, something that like we haven't, even though we maybe have disassociated from within ourselves, we've never been able to sever from that, because as soon as we do, we're done, right? Yeah. So it's this ritual of feeding the memory. um when we are, like, the current culture is so enamored and obsessed with being in the present. But, like Patanjali says, the purest form of memory is recognizing the continuity of the past, the present, and the future. And interestingly enough, the daughter of, in the Greek mythology, of the Titans and the gods was Menemmone. She was the goddess of memory, who then went on to beget the 9 muses. So when the soul descends into the underworld, they could either drink from the spring, in which they would no longer have pain, but they would also forget everything and forget the wisdom that they had. And by invoking memory, it helps us to move forward. And it's also, without memory, is there even art?
Mm.
So we're all, just creating these wonderful fractals, and I was talking about it with Ray as I'm writing my manuscript, like all we ever see is a fractal.
Mm.
And so we know that all we're ever seeing are like, is what we imagine it to be, but we can drop into a deeper remembrance of our own origins and our own source. And that's like Triambaka mantra, like the grieving of death, disease, separation, but there is a greater continuity. Like a ripened gourd falls from the vine remains. And that's our umbilicus. That's Surya Namaskara. That's where we're like, hey, I know you are my source. And I remember this umbilicus. Yeah. Woohoo.
Yay. That's beautiful. That's really
Belly
well
button.
said. Yeah.
When I was a kid, you know how you have these memories that really imprint in you? I must have been like 6 or 7, and we went up to Delphi, where the oracle was. And of course, her famous sutra over her doorway, which was Gnosos Afton, know thyself. You would go and ask her questions, and she would be like, she would speak in metaphor. She didn't like spell it out for you. You had to like reflect and feel into it. And there they have an omphalos, which was this large sphere that was carved with all these organic shapes and vines. And it symbolizes the navel of the universe.
Wow.
And it's really interesting, as I share this, because even like in the yoga tradition, they say, like, who was the source of yoga? And, some iterations even say that Patanjali's grandfather was Hiranyagarbha, which was the golden womb of creation, So yeah, our lineage goes way back further than, Aunt Violet and Uncle Lester and it goes way, way back, our family tree. Yeah. And who am I anyway? Why does my name even really matter?
Yeah. Both are true. Both are true. We need you. And, you know, this has been really fun. Thank you so much. Is there anything you want to say in closing? I mean, you've said it all, but
Um, well, it's interesting, a technique that was recently shared with my son, because sometimes he said, that he feels like his mind goes quicker, his eyes go quicker than his mind, and his mind goes quicker than what he wants, what he's feeling, and then he says things he doesn't mean. And sometimes he feels like then his limbs go numb. And, he's even shared to me like how he's really concerned about his generation post COVID, that they were in isolation for so long, and they lacked a lot of foundational learning, when they were at home, and socialization skills. And he says, and the screens have ruined our generations. And it's like so deep to hear him say this. So I think sometimes he feels overwhelmed. And then, of course, the erosion of what's happening. I mean, look, a lot of these, human constructs are beautiful things, such as art and education, and the way that funding is being cut so much from education. It just is very scary for a little child. So sometimes he goes into overwhelm. And he was taught this grounding technique. You can Google it. It's called 5-4-3-2-1. And so, in the morning and at night, and he does it on his own, and then at other times during the day, is just taking a moment. What are 5 things I can see? And going into detail. What are 3 things that I can touch? What are 3 things that I can hear? 2 things that I can smell, and 1 thing that I can taste. And by doing that, it gets us into that avastana. It brings us back into the ground being of ourself, which is like we are consciousness having this wonderful experience in the world ground. And we can do it from a place of, we can both become, and we also have the grace of just being. That feeding isn't something that has to be a burden, but it's a joy, right? I mean, every time you're there with sweet Luca, talk about communion.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, like that my body can support this other being, and this other being is growing me as I'm feeding it. Like this, to be a part of life's reciprocity, as Rumi would say, what else could humans want? Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your wonderful questions. And I'm excited for next episode because a student did send them in some questions, and we love it. Stoke us with your questions so we can keep feeding this fire. It's very exciting. And I just noticed that we have like over 7,000 downloads of our episodes. So thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha. That's awesome.